Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I can't see the chat, but I think Heather will monitor that for us. So I really appreciate the invitation to be here today from Heather and Jessica Riddell. I'm going to, in the series of lectures here, I'm going to take you through a look into my virtual classroom, and I've called it Online Learning in Motion with EXS 117, which is one of those intro exercise science courses in the sports studies department at Bishop's University. So I'm a sessional or a contract faculty member within that department, and I'm also still doing my PhD as well, so PhD student currently as well. I've got this adorable puppy picture. I can't have any presentations without my very new addition to my my sidekick. So got my little 5-month-old puppy there. So I started out today with just a quick course description. The gist of it, this is what Bishop's provides me, to sort of get the course off the ground. And last year, so winter 2020 was the first year that this course was offered. So, this was sort of our starting point. And essentially what I'm looking at in the course is what is physical activity, what is exercise. My students will know that there are differences between these terms, as well as, the components of fitness, but particularly with this course, it's how they intertwine with long-term health. So it's really, a healthy living course. In the department, we also have a focus on liberal education competencies, and I think with the breadth of this course, it's a really great opportunity to introduce, quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, and information literacy at the introductory level. So, those were sort of written in that course description for me, but I definitely have enjoyed having a focus on introducing some of these topics throughout the course. So I sort of, I get that blurb for the course, and I hear, have my own expertise and my own experiences, and then I hear some feedback from students, or some anecdotal reporting from students. And each semester, I sort of take the combination of those three things and make 4 or 5 goals for the course, and what I hope to portray through the course that semester. Excuse me. And of course, in class versus online, there are some slight differences to these goals for sure. But I would say there's also a good chunk of overlap, even though we've changed to the online format. So basically, I'll walk through the 5 goals, and I've sort of structured my presentation around these 5 goals. So hopefully it will be fairly easy to follow. The first one right away, get to know my students and vice versa, was a priority for me. I know that some survey reporting and just some feedback I've had from students says that maybe we're not getting to know each other as well in this online format this year. So, I really wanted to prioritize this. And the one benefit, there's a few drawbacks to being a younger professor and balancing a PhD at the same time, but one benefit is that when we switched to the online learning, when the pandemic started, I actually still had a few graduate seminar classes going on my end. So I have this funny balance of being both online professor and online student. And I have to say that I experienced a little bit of lack of getting to know some professors as a student this year. So I really wanted to place emphasis on that. And as we know, with Bishop's University and the other Maple League schools, we have this great interaction with student and professor. So I didn't want to lose that with the online format. I also wanted to keep students on track despite the lack of face-to-face interaction. It's still, EXS 117 is a synchronous course, but, sometimes it can be a little harder to stay on track without that face-to-face component. I wanted to develop a sense of community within the course. I think it's safe to say we're all a little bit lonelier these days. And given that a large percentage of my students are first year students, I thought perhaps they don't know too many people. So it's an important opportunity to develop a bit of a sense of community. The fourth goal is sort of the closest to my heart, I would say, and is there regardless of online or in-person learning. I really wanted to provide students some skills and confidence when reading scientific publications related to health and exercise sciences. And I think this really intertwines well with those liberal education competencies. So we'll address that a little bit. And finally, I like to inspire or try to inspire students to apply learning objectives to their everyday lives. So at the end of the day, it's a healthy living course, and it's wonderful to learn the theory, but I like to sort of inspire students to try and apply some of these concepts as well. Sorry for the little crinkle. I have paper notes. I'm a little old school that way. So basically, I'll just break down the 5 goals and sort of some strategies of how I tackle each goal in my online classroom, and then we can sort of chat, and if there are any questions, there'll be plenty of time, I think, for those at the end. But if you need to jump in the chat, I think Heather will just let me know as we go. So, like I said, I started off with wanting to get to know my students and vice versa. I teach a class of 130 students, which by Maple Leaf standards is quite large. So, getting to know students is a tall order, whether you're online or in person with a class of that size. But in my experience, a little effort on the professor's part can go a long way with the students. I know that they appreciate a little bit more of a personal interaction even in those larger classes. So I think it's a worthwhile goal still. Essentially, there's a few strategies that I kick off to do this, but right away I started the semester with a very goofy get to know your professor video. And I did it from the elliptical trainer, so you can see I've screenshotted that there. It's a healthy living course, so the first day was shorter. So it was a shorter asynchronous lecture just for the very first day to get us going. So I decided to challenge the students to get, 20 minutes of extra physical activity. So I tried to lead by example, and I did that, mini lecture from the elliptical. And what I did was, I sort of recruited a family member, and we did like a rapid fire interview, and some questions were, related to my professional life, some to my sports background, and then, a few goofy personal questions as well, just to, show the students that I'm not just a face behind a screen. For a lot of students I've never met before. So I think, like I said, a little bit can sometimes go a long way. And then, of course, so that was sort of the getting to know me. Of course, I also wanted to get to know my students. So on the first day there, I did a little survey, quiz survey in Moodle, and I just asked them 2 quick questions. I think, in my experience, if you overload the questions, your response rate might go down, but I kept it simple to 2 quick questions. I asked them, why did you choose to take this course? And I kind of said in parentheses, be as honest as you want. It can be, that you have goals, fitness goals related to the topic, you're a bit of a gym rat, or it could be that it was a mandatory course for you. And then the second question was just, tell me something interesting about yourself. So, very broad, open-ended question. And out of 130 students, I think about 100 people responded. So, pretty good response rate for an optional kick off the semester quiz or survey. And, I learned some important themes from the quiz. Why did, in terms of why did students choose to take this course? A large percentage told me, this is a mandatory course for my program, and that makes total sense. Sports studies is, on the larger side these days. It's a growing program, and this course is one of the few that is mandatory for all disciplines within the program. So it's really that introduction to the health side that everyone in the program needs to take. So fully expected, many students being a mandatory course. I saw a lot of students saying, I'm more on the business side of sports studies, and this is sort of my health-related component. Some folks said they were interested in the content and setting fitness goals. I had a chunk say, I'm retiring from sport or getting a little bit older out of the, teen years. I want to learn a little bit about changing healthy habits. And then, a huge proportion said I needed a non-business elective. So that gave me some indication that, between business side of sports studies and non-business elective, that I had a lot of business folks in the crowd. Fun facts, I just threw a few common themes here. We saw lots of athletes in the course, which makes sense. I saw a lot of students say they were from Western Canada, and my doctoral work and master's work is via Calgary, so a little bit of ties out there. And I learned something new because I had a lot of folks say that they were twins, and I thought, this is crazy. I must have a disproportionately high number of twins, but actually I matched the national average, so I learned something new. I looked it up. So this gave me, a bit of an indication of some of the folks that are sitting on the other side of the screens this semester. And, the great thing about this is you can also kind of use this as a bit of a cheat sheet. And I'll sort of explain how that comes about. With 130 students, like I said, it's tough to get to know your students. And while I make a strong effort to remember name and response, that's not always going to happen. But the great thing about this quiz is that it's saved. So, if I'm, for example, going to have a one-on-one meeting with a student, I can go back and see, why did they take this course? What were their goals for this course? And that can be helpful when you go to have one-on-one meetings with these students later. So it gives me a bit of a cheat sheet because the answers are saved and I can go back as well. So with 130 students, I find that really helpful. The second sort of goal from that first 5 lists was to keep students on track despite that lack of face-to-face lecture. So I've tackled a few strategies, and of course, we're only halfway through the course, so I don't know 100% sure which strategies the students like the most or like the least, but I sort of have these 3 main strategies that I've worked with. The first one was using progress quizzes. So the first thing I did when I made the course outline for this year versus last year was I actually removed one of the midterm exams. So last year I had 2 midterms and a final. This year I decided to remove one of those midterms and distribute the weighting of that midterm over 5 mini quizzes. So it's about 2 to 3 lectures of content for each quiz. And my idea there was sort of, they're very small quizzes, but the idea was to sort of force the students to pick up the main points of the lectures as we go, rather than having them do this binge watching style before midterms and finals. With having pre-recorded, or I guess not pre-recorded, I record the live lectures and post them to Moodle. And, my fear was that students would just, put off watching them and not come to class and then do this, Netflix style binge watch before the exams. So I tried to prevent that a little because, maybe it works for the odd folk, but I think that for the most part, it's probably not the best strategy. And, results of the first 2 quizzes were very good. 81%, 79%. So, they're very strong. And the first few lectures, folks were definitely picking out those main points. It also gives me an idea what to review during the sort of pre-midterm and pre-final review sessions. I make sure to always have those review sessions, whether online or in person. And, if I go back and see, okay, this is a question that a lot of folks got wrong on the progress quizzes, it gives me an indication that, I could probably bringing those topics back up in the review would probably be beneficial. The other thing I've done in this progress quiz category is develop a bonus quiz that's at the end of the semester. And that way you can, if you complete the bonus quiz, you can drop your lowest grade for a 3 out of 3. So, everyone has a bad day, so that's a little bit appealing. And what I did here is in our department, we have the Congress of Sports Studies, which is a bit of a research conference or symposium that's going to be online this year towards the end of the semester. So what I have here is I made a few questions, and it's just related to, a research project that you watched a presentation or read a poster from the Congress. You can pick one out and then answer a few questions about it. So that's an optional quiz on top of the 5 mini quizzes. And I think this was beneficial. We've heard a few presentations recently about this style of flexible grading, and, allowing the students to pick and choose a little bit, where their final grade and weightings lie. And I'll be totally honest, this is a new topic and a new revelation for me. And I have a large class, 130. It was the first time I was going all online. And it was, this flexible grading was something that I aspire to, but honestly was not quite ready to do in full steam this semester. So this bonus quiz, it gives us a little bit of a taste of that. It gives the students a little bit of flexibility to, make up for if they had an off day with one of these small quizzes, but was not so overwhelming for me, as we had all these large class, new formats, was not so overwhelming as embarking upon that. But I hope to embark upon the flexible grading more with more experience. It just, this was sort of the max I could go for this semester. Another strategy that I used to keep students on track were weekly video to-do lists. So I don't know about folks in the audience today, but I have a lot of emails coming in, and I'm pretty confident everyone does. So I thought rather than sending an email every Monday, I thought maybe this fun video style to-do list instead might break up the email monotony a bit. So every Monday morning I do, 1 minute max of video reminder of what's to come. So that could include, if we have a quiz, if, there's an in-class activity, just the topics of the lectures. And typically I see about 50 views per week at watching, 95% of that 1 minute video. So, a little less than half the class is using them. So I do also, sort of ping via Moodle when there's going to be a quiz, just to make sure we have a secondary quiz reminder, because I don't want only 50 students getting that reminder. So, I've kind of tackled this combination of weekly video to do as well as a little ping reminder via Moodle for those quizzes, so nobody's missing out on information. Finally, I did something called the question of the week this year, and it was kind of a last minute addition to my course, to be honest. It was the first Friday of the semester, and I had posted the weekly to do on Monday. We weren't into quiz zone yet, and I thought, how can I just have a little extra added assurance that folks are keeping on track if they desire that additional practice. So I decided, to post an optional question of the week every Friday, so students can get a little extra practice if they want. It's no strings attached. There's no evaluation of it. But I did tell the students, perhaps you'll see a question on question of the week, and then it will come back in a quiz later. So just a little bit of extra practice every Friday. The third sort of priority here, and again is prevalent whether we're online or in person, but perhaps is something that needs a little more time and consideration in the online format, is to develop a sense of community in the course. So, I have this breakout channel style that was my sort of hope of developing community in the course. And the way I thought of it is to replace my commonly used think, pair, share in the classroom. So when we're in the large classroom of 130, I typically saw the same 10 people, raising their hands to answer questions or ask questions fairly frequently. And I understand, 130 is a large lecture hall, and I think that think, pair, share is helpful. I will sporadically through lectures ask a bit of a question, and the students kind of have 1 minute to chat about it amongst their little groups that they're just kind of naturally seated in, and then we bring it back to the full classroom. And I was using this very, very frequently in the in-person setting, and I kind of had to attack, okay, how am I going to sort of transition this into the online format? I didn't want to it was a bit unrealistic, I think, to have, every 10 minutes have like a 1 minute breakout room. I think that it would just be a little bit too, okay, now we're in a breakout room, now we're back to the lecture. So I haven't tried that style. Instead, what I tried to do is sort of make larger think pair shares and have one session every few lectures. And so these typically include, reading a fun small article and picking out key course concepts. It could also be applying principles from the course to design a fake exercise plan, for example, and other small works that take, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes, and then we come back to the classroom. So I put a little screenshot there. The first one that we do, which I think is hilarious, and a lot of students get a good chuckle out of it too. Where we start talking about scientific articles and picking out information. So I like to kick off with this paper called Head and Neck Injury Risks in Heavy Metal, Headbangers Stuck Between Rock and a Hard Base. It's a really short scientific paper, and it's really goofy. It's about, measuring injury rates in heavy metal headbangers, and then they talk about, how could we mitigate this risk? And they talk about headbanging to Celine Dion because it's slower paced. And it's just a really fun paper, but, it has a lot of very good, important jargon, important terms that students are able to pick out. So it kind of gets them an intro in there, and they work together, and it can be a little bit of a bonding experience because it's just such a fun and goofy paper. With these breakout channels and teams, I also find them important because we essentially carry the same groups forward. So rather than having a different breakout channel each couple of lectures, I make sure it's consistent. So that way you're working with the same 5 members of your group from session to session, and that way, for folks that maybe are first years and haven't even met classmates in person yet, it's a way to just sort of, follow along the course with a few classmates. And these groups come back for a very small evaluation at the end of the semester as well. So some pros to this style, it allows students to engage with smaller groups. So once again, not everyone is comfortable speaking up in front of 130 folks. And I totally get that. So at least it's an opportunity for students to speak up in a less intimidating context. Of course, we review and apply course concepts. So, repetition and application is very key for pedagogy. So I think it gives a stronger learning opportunity. And then, of course, that sense of community was the main goal. For some of the cons, there are certain students who don't love group discussions, whether it's online or in person. And, we have some folks vocal saying, I just don't like the breakout channels. So, there are students in my class who say the opposite too. They say, we haven't seen our group in a couple days. I miss my group members. But you have a bit of a mishmash there of students' feelings. And then some students did also report difficulty having, let's say, instructions to an activity as well as a call open. So, perhaps these students are working with just one small screen, and they found it a little bit overwhelming to have multiple things going at once. So, of course, that's a consideration that we try to mitigate our best. The last con that I don't actually have listed there because it's sort of newly come about is one downside that I've noticed of having these consistent groups all the way through is that there are some folks who their entire group doesn't show up consistently. I thought, it's a random assortment of 130 students into 25, 26 groups. I felt, fairly confident that the random assortment would ensure that at least, 2 members, hopefully 3, are showing up each class in each group. But as a matter of fact, we got a bit unlucky, and some groups are full with 5 members and some groups, only had 1 person showing up. So we ended up, mitigating that with an optional channel. So if you were alone, you could go into a different channel. But I understand it's a bit disappointing from the member who's consistently showing up and the rest of their group isn't. So the fourth goal here, like I said, it's probably my favorite goal and a very important priority to me, whether we're talking online or in person, is to provide students with some skills and confidence for reading scientific publications. I think that, often or maybe sometimes, depending on the school, this skill is underestimated a little bit in the earlier years of undergraduate process, and then in the upper years, maybe it's expected that we've had a little more exposure, but perhaps a large number of students are still feeling uneasy about reading scientific publications. And I've seen this a lot with in my research setting when I've been mentoring or supervising undergraduate students at a variety of levels in the undergrad process that I think in my experience, perhaps in external to Maple League a little bit, but my experience there is that some students are not very comfortable reading these publications. So I like to prioritize an early intro to that process. Of course, it's hugely important for these liberal ed competencies, so quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, and especially information literacy, all come into play with this learning priority. And I also think that, this priority is especially important in the fields of health and exercise science because we are just completely bombarded with, media style articles or, social media style posts about health and fitness and exercise and diets. It's a field that we are absolutely bombarded with, and not necessarily in the good way. I think that, maybe the intention of all these publications is to improve health, but I think in a lot of contexts, it actually does the opposite. It's very overwhelming and can be definitely misleading. So my goal in this course, whether it's a student in sports studies who's going to continue on in the field or it's a student taking the course as an elective, I think that this goal is equally important for both types of students. And I essentially want students to learn and gain skills in order to appraise this information that we're bombarded with. So rather than, being overwhelmed by the information or taking every piece of information at face value, I want to provide the students skills so that they can, more critically think about this information and look up those trusted sources, know, where to find them and use them in order to critically appraise this information. Of course, in a class of 130, I'm also not practicing this one-on-one with students. So same thing, when they go home at the end of the day and are sitting on Instagram and see something health related, they don't have a classroom full of people or a professor to sort of bounce ideas off of or chat about the topic with. So I think it's a really important skill for folks to take home. So I have a few strategies at how I tackle this. The first thing I do in this course is try and take a bit of a fresh look at an introduction to research methods, as well as introduce the principles of epidemiology. So most students do take a research methods course. So I obviously don't repeat a full intensive research methods course, but I take a couple lectures just to sort of reiterate some of these research methods topics, but more specific to health and exercise science at that intro level. I also like to introduce principles of epidemiology. I think everyone this year, has heard the term epidemiology more than ever before. So epidemiology is really looking at, the causes and spreads or the distributions of diseases or different health outcomes through populations. And I think that in terms of appraising, information out there related to health, related to, fitness and the relationship between the two, I think learning some of these principles of epidemiology can really help students understand, disease and health outcomes trending through populations, which, helps sort of understanding some of these topics a little more clearly. And feedback from students, a lot of folks say, I had seen some of these materials before, but it was nice to repeat them, in a little bit more context-specific format. So usually the students, while it's a bit challenging, usually the students enjoy those couple of lectures. I also do a poll style application question activity during some of my lectures. One of my favorites is this, I call it real or fake research, and I sort of make a list of titles, only titles, and half of them are real and half of them are fake research related to health or exercise science. And all I do is, read out the title, and the students have to vote whether they think it's real or fake. Some of them are more obviously real. Some of them I use, I think it's called the Ig Nobel Prize. It's sort of great research, but that, is a little bit funny in context. And as well, some of them I just completely make up on my own. So sort of the goal with this is to teach students or bring to light how challenging it is to decide if something is real or fake just by a title. In terms of social media and health-related topics, how often are we just reading a title or, a very, very short blurb? So this exercise, or I guess educational exercise, sort of brings to light just how challenging it can be. And I think that's something that a lot of students take forward, understanding that titles only tell a small portion of the picture. But it's also just a really fun and engaging activity. We also do a lecture specific to media literacy in the fields of health and exercise science. So, we just talk about fitness and health in the context of, the press, of social media. I link that a little bit to some other topics related to wearable technology and other aspects like that, which I'll speak about quickly in the last goal. But it's also just a really engaging lecture, I find, and can be quite eye-opening for students as well. And they also see that link to media in their everyday life as well. So I think students really enjoy that lecture. Finally, we do a case study workshop, and this one is for, a small amount of evaluation. And what they do is they are given sort of a hypothetical health-related decision. So, you have this condition, you have to choose a treatment, and basically I give them the scientific article which outlines the background and the different treatment options. And then they have to use this article in order to decide and let me know which treatment option they would choose. So there are some guiding questions to help them through the process. But again, it's just really applicable to some of the goals from the course as well as everyday life. We are faced with these decisions, and sometimes it's totally outside of our scope of knowledge. But being able to read some information critically, appraise it, understand the material can really be beneficial in making those personal decisions. So this case study is really fun in that it highlights a lot of the principles that we see in the course, but it also is something that students understand could be very applicable to their everyday lives. So my fifth and final, and I think we're doing pretty well on time, my fifth and final goal for the course is to inspire students to apply learning outcomes to their everyday lives. And, like I said, in the context of this healthy living assignment, of course, we want it to be, we want to be gaining those academic concepts, but we also, really want to see and are eager to see how it can intertwine with everyday lives. So I decide to harness some power of, free available technology to apply concepts and have a more personal assignment. So for this goal, I'm actually just going to walk you through so you can see the assignment that I do. Essentially, I use something called MyFitnessPal, and I am not, I have no affiliation to MyFitnessPal. I just choose it because it's pretty user-friendly, and it's free with the exception of there are advertisements. But it's a platform that allows you to go in, and every day you can track your physical activity or exercise as well as your food intake. And the reason why I picked this rather than doing it by hand is just because it's really user friendly, and it can sort of store your workouts so that you can more easily pull them up. And so the purpose of doing this is to give students an opportunity to become more aware of their healthy, active living habits in everyday life. So, I'm not telling them they have to meet a certain amount of activity, nothing specific on diets, and it's more just to bring an awareness of their own personal habits into focus. So we use that to track for 5 consecutive days, and I asked them to include at least one weekend day, because obviously a Saturday would look quite different from a Monday. So yeah, I get them to do that tracking for 5 days. And then based on your 5-day record, I asked them to set themselves a SMART goal. So SMART goals are just, it's some criteria for making more concrete, more, specific and measurable goals. And we study that in one lecture of the course. So I asked them to create this SMART goal and, let me know why they think it meets the SMART criteria and why it's important to them. And then based on this SMART goal, they go and they find a peer-reviewed scientific journal article that supports, one or more aspects of your goal. So, an example could be related to just my diet. I want to slightly reduce the amount of caffeine in my diet. So, they could look up a publication that talks about how to reduce caffeine. It could be more of the biological or physiological mechanisms of how caffeine works. It just has to be, related to that goal. And then they practice their, appraisal of the journal by telling me a little bit about the journal article, by telling me a little bit more about the article and then relating it to their goal. They then go back and repeat part 1, so they track for another 5-day period. And again, this is why, I kind of recommend, even though have no affiliation with MyFitnessPal, I kind of recommend it just because, it's user friendly and it'll bring back things quite easily, more so than by hand. And they have to just write a written reflection. It's not a super in-depth reflection, but, what are the similarities and differences between your tracked periods? And, did you achieve your goal? Did you partially achieve your goal? A little bit of goal reflection there. The final component is where we come back to those breakout groups, and essentially I have them come back to their groups and talk about common strategies that they use. So an example could be, we all used a helping partner who was maybe trying to achieve the same goal, or who had said they would help us stay on track with that goal, and that was a common strategy that we all found helpful in completing our goals, or something along these lines. So talking about common strategies, and then finding, once again as a group, a scientific article that talks about these helpful strategies. So that's a little bit more of a health psychology context, and we do cover some examples in one of our lectures before we get to that point. So again, it's reinforcing some of those health psychology principles that we see. And also just to reflect on, future strategies that you might take forward with you from this assignment. So just really quickly, some of the pros and cons of this style of assignment. Students love seeing course concepts applied directly to their lives. I've had students last year say that they continue tracking and really enjoy well beyond the assignment and the course being done. I think that, we're making this assignment individual, but we're still able to come back to those groups at the end without having to share the individual components. So, I don't ask the students to share what their goal was, or, what their activity level is. It's more sharing those strategies, right? So there's more common ground, and they don't have to bring as much of a personal element to that group component. It's also always fun to, harness free resources, and like I, said free in quotes because there are ads there, but students can pair wearable technology that they already have to the MyFitnessPal if they choose. So that's fun as well. If you have an iPhone or Android with step counters, they can use that. If you have a watch, they can use that. But honestly, it's also very easy to use the program, even if you don't have any of these. I wouldn't say one is an advantage or a disadvantage. So it's fun to see students using what they have. The cons, this can be a very delicate assignment. Anytime that we're applying a personal assignment in a course context, I think, it's delicate and we have to be careful. So right away, I try and make very clear that I'm not judging lifestyle choices, I'm not judging exercise or diets, but rather giving students an opportunity to become more aware of their own habits. I emphasize as well, this is not a weight loss assignment. 99% of the SMART goals I get are not related to weight loss, but I try and emphasize it's not a weight loss, it's not a weight gain assignment. The SMART goals can be about anything related to the topic. And if a student is concerned about doing this assignment and tracking these types of behaviors, right away I suggest, okay, let's track something different, such as sleep, quantity and quality of sleep, which is also something we chat about in the course. Students can also be uncomfortable with MyFitnessPal and equivalent programs. As I sort of emphasized through, I suggest using this because it's available and it's user-friendly. But as soon as a student expresses concern, I say you can use a fake name, but some folks are just not comfortable with their using this online platform, and I 100% understand that. So they're definitely welcome to track by hand instead. Overall, I would say that students really enjoy seeing their own goals, their own habits come into play in the course, and I think there are some pros and some cons, but overall, it's been a very well received assignment. Before I finish up these last 2 minutes here, I just thought I would finish up with what the semester has taught me so far. I think right away, catering to all learners and situations. It's a synchronous course, and at first I was expecting students to show up for the online lecture, just as I would expect students to come to class in person. But then I discovered, there are maybe more roadblocks in the online format. Some students said I was in class and then my internet crashed halfway through. So I started to realize, okay, having, a backup plan, having some pre-recorded material as well is helpful. Students are still eager to engage with online learning. I was pleasantly surprised in how many engagements, via the chat, via the breakout rooms. And sometimes in the chat alone, we're seeing over 100 engagements per lecture. So I was pleasantly surprised in the big class. And then I also noticed attention spans are a little shorter than I thought online. So, maybe we have some pros and some challenges here, but obviously working on mitigating this, trying my best to be engaging, but it's a challenge. So baby steps and better each day, hopefully. I also just wanted to pass on a huge thanks to my OLTCs. I don't know if this is a program with all Maple Leaf schools, but at Bishop's we have those online learning consultants, and I have Charlotte and Emma who've been working so hard for me to make all these course dreams come true. Anytime I have a vision, they're able to help me put it into action, so that's really appreciated. And like I said at the beginning, I'm currently doing my PhD as well, so having this help is absolutely wonderful, and definitely making the course its best.